Okay, so we're on air, guys. Hello and welcome to another version of the live FIF podcast brought to you on FIF TV on YouTube. Joining me this week, as usual, is Nicholas Carroll, coming in happy again. I'm not used to you being this happy all the time, Nick, but Inter are doing well. How are things with you?
Yes, very well, thanks, Connor. 5 in a row. It's somewhat unheard of in recent times, but yes, very happy. And I'm just trying to kind of calm down from that Torino-Milan game at the moment. I've made myself a nice little drink, so just trying to chill the nerves and try and comprehend what just happened.
Yeah, it's much needed. I've had to have a beer as well just because that was crazy. I was trying to keep up with it for so long, but it was getting difficult. And also joining us in the absence of Luca Gumby this week is a special guest in Blair Newman. Blair, how about you just introduce yourself to the watchers there?
Hi, Connor. It's good to be on the show. Thank you for having me. I'm a full-time freelance writer focusing on Italian football. I've written for 442, Bleacher Report, and a few others. So, yeah, really pleased to be on the show. Talk about calcio.
Yeah, it's good to finally have you on after weeks of trying to get you. Right, so we've touched on Milan Torino. Let's just dive straight in. Torino went 2-0 up through Belotti and Benassi. Then Milan came charging back in the second half and eventually drew 2 each. So, Nick, where do we begin with this? Nick, guess what you're doing? Turn your mic on.
This is why I can't mute my mic. I'm sorry, listeners. My apologies. Unbelievable. So unprofessional. FIF, we're all professionals here.
Well, we all are, except for you. Go on.
As I was saying, I'm not sure how to even start with that match. It was, I guess knowing how both of those teams played, it did have a bit of an element of it could go that way, given that both defenses are somewhat questionable at the best of times, and I guess probably Torino in particular, they're very much an attacking team. So, yeah, I mean, Torino just kind of took it to them at the start, and it looked like for a while it could get quite embarrassing for Milan. And if they got that penalty, if Adam Ljajic actually hit the penalty with any kind of vigor or anything, 3-0, that, I mean, you can't say for sure, but it looked like it would have been game over. So I think Torino will be very disappointed not to have got a result, particularly with the penalty as well. I mean, while it is a penalty, I agree that, by the rules it is one, but if you went through every Serie A match and pulled up every time that happens in the box, then there would be, a handful of penalties a match at least. So, I don't know if they're going to be consistent with that kind of stuff, I'm all happy for it. But, I think they're possibly a bit hard done by, but at the same time, a draw is probably relatively fair.
Yeah, so Andrea Belotti scored again early on, and he had a couple of chances to score a few more before Milan started to come back. He's been linked with a move away recently. Arsenal have been touted as interested, and pretty much anybody else. I think there's links with China as well. I think the price tag on him at the moment is between 90 and 100 million. Obviously, that's absolutely crazy money. But Blair, I'm going to throw over to you for this one. Just how much do you think Andrea Belotti is worth at the moment?
Well, I think he's one of the top strikers in Serie A. So, if you look at guys like Higuain and Icardi and what they're worth, he's probably just beneath them. But he's Italy's number one striker, I would argue, at the moment. I don't know what you guys would say about that, but that's my opinion. And, if you're Italy's number one striker and you're scoring regularly in Serie A and consistently, not 4 goals one game, none the next, but consistently scoring goals, I'd say that valuation it's exaggerated, but he's definitely worth sort of around 50 million euros in my opinion. Of course, it's entirely subjective, and the transfer market's crazy, so my opinion's almost completely and totally invalid. But that's what I would have him at, something around there.
Right, just Nick, do you want to jump in on that? I'm going to look at something technical for a sec.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you, Blair. He is definitely the best striker that Italy has at the moment, and I mean, he's 23 years old, which is kind of ridiculous. But I guess on one hand, it kind of shows the lack of talent there has been for Italy in terms of strike force the last few years. Really, the only one that Italy's been relying on is Graziano Pelle, of course, who's gone to China now. So he's definitely I guess the new big talent of the next generation. It's hard with the amount of money that's been thrown around these days. While I don't think it's really market value, but it's kind of just a sign of the times that clubs are willing to pay well beyond market value. They seem to be just extorted prices. But then you consider the 90 million euro that's paid for a 28-year-old in Gonzalo Higuain. Yes, the record-breaking Serie A goal scorer, but 28 years old. And then when you put that into perspective, then for Belotti, a 23-year-old who's doing what he is at such a young age, at such when he's still got so much more maturity to come, it does make a lot of sense. And I props to Torino for actually putting a price tag like that on him, because I think clubs like that really should be trying to protect the investments that they've made over the years, but also I guess for Serie A itself, I think it's good, and these players need to actually develop. So the longer these players can actually stay with teams like this, which possibly contradicts the likes of Gagliardini, who we'll probably discuss later, but I think the better for their own development, really.
Yeah, so it wasn't just Belotti in terms of Italian players or even young Italian players on the pitch today. I think it was 15 of the 22 that started the game were actually Italian, which is kind of refreshing to see. And in Torino and Milan, there's a lot of young Italian talent coming through. So is Italy's future very much seen in this current Torino side, along with a few who are coming through at Milan and then Atalanta as well? Or can you guys see these guys just fading into the background and becoming mediocre Serie A players as they develop a bit more?
Did you want to take that, Blair, or? No.
Blair, I think your mic's gone again. Try speak. Nick, do you want to take that question while Blair tries to?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good point. I mean, Belotti, Benassi, I guess they're the two standouts that have been discussed a lot in the media of late, and they very much look like they will be a staple somewhat of the next Azzurri generation. Barreca as well, I guess you could say. So, yes, I mean, it's always hard. You never want to kind of jinx it and say, these players are going to be the next, Italian superstars, because that's the kind of pressure that can ruin careers. And as I said, I think while they show so much promise, a lot can go wrong. And we've seen that so many times, particularly with Italian players, the likes of, for example, Aquilani, how such a promising player and his career just kind of flopped, basically. So I think they need to be developed properly. They have the potential 100% to be the next generation for Italy. The potential is amazing, and possibly up there with previous generations, but they need to be developed and fostered in. And I think Italy has started to do that by bringing some of the young players into the Azzurri squad to actually learn from the older players. So there is a lot of promise, but I think we should just be wary on putting too much pressure on them at this young age, I guess.
Yeah, Blair, I think your mic is being picked up again now, thankfully. So have you any thoughts on that?
Sorry, I was too busy sorting out my microphone to actually pay attention. What was the question?
We're just talking about the youngsters that are coming through, particularly at Torino, like Belotti, Benassi, Barreca. Do you think they have the ability to continue their development and become key players for Italy in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly from what I've seen of Barreca this season, he's quite a new player to this scene, isn't he? But he looks very mature tactically and stuff. In terms of modern fullbacks, he seems quite safe as well defensively. And Benassi, I've been impressed with for a few years. Mihajlovic seems to have made him a regular first teamer this season, and he seems to be thriving at that. And up front, Belotti's just an absolute beast. He's an all-round striker. He's Italy's number one of the best strikers in Serie A. So I don't see them fading away. Certainly not Belotti and Benassi, because they've been there for a few seasons and they've proven themselves over 24 months or so.
Yeah, well, Nick, you did mention players who kind of never fulfilled their potential, and one of those on show tonight was, he's not Italian, but Adam Ljajic. That was his Serie A career just summed up in one night for me. He was brilliant for 5 minutes, then he was terrible for another 5. And he just blew so hot and cold, like he has done pretty much wherever he's been. Sinisa Mihajlovic has been getting quite impatient with him. I think he told him he needed to grow up or wake up earlier this season. And you could see him getting a little bit angered on the touchline this evening. Nick, what do you think is next for Ljajic if he fails again at Torino, like he very well could?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of done the rounds for a few years now, so he's really at the point where he needs to kind of focus and really make this work. And I guess the annoying thing is, maybe for Mihajlovic, and I guess from outsiders just watching the match, is that Torino squad, the format, the structure of that team is perfect for Ljajic. Like, that is exactly the type of team that he should be thriving in. So I can understand Mihajlovic's frustration completely, and you have to wonder whether it is, it always does seem to be somewhat of a mental or a mentality issue with Ljajic, because the talent is unquestionably there. We've all seen it in bits, and you do, as you said, Connor, he can be one of the most frustrating players in Serie A, because he will show that brilliance and then within 30 seconds will show that exact opposite. But in saying that, I don't want to put him down too much, because I mean, he has had a bit of a lull in form. I don't think he's scored in 6 starts. He's got 1 assist in those last 6 starts. But at the same time, over that period, Torino's only won one match as well. So they haven't been in the best of form as a team as well. And the whole season, he has got 5 goals and 4 assists to his name. So, he has been performing. I think just that dip in form probably is getting to Mihajlovic probably a bit. But I don't think he should lose patience too quickly, because I still think he plays a key part. And even if he's not producing the goals necessarily, I think there's a lot can be said for his presence in the team, just in being that attacking threat. I guess most defenders in Serie A know who Adam Ljajic is, and know if you give him space in and around the box, then he will use it and use it effectively. So he pulls a lot of attention on himself, and that can only help the likes of Andrea Belotti. So in that respect, I still think he's very important to the team. So, but whether that mentality thing is going to just be an ongoing thing with him, or whether he finally matures, that's hard to say.
Yeah, Blair, if you don't mind, I'd like to move away from Torino now and to Milan. I don't want to sound too much like Brendan Rodgers, but they showed amazing character to come back from being 2-0 behind and a penalty to make it 3. But do you think this is a 1-point drop for them still? They should have ambitions of at least trying to qualify for the Champions League. You've covered them quite closely for the most part of this season. What do you think they could realistically do come May?
I think for much of this season, I've said top 6 would be realistic. I think top 4 isn't a thing in Italy, because it's the top 3 qualify for the Champions League. But I think team that aren't Juventus, Napoli and Roma. Do you know what I mean? I think Juve and Napoli and Roma are just they're levels ahead of Milan really in terms of squad and their preparation and stuff for the last few seasons. They've got established coaches, so I think Milan can aim for 4th. it's a pretty open pack. I mean, Fiorentina have been underwhelming for much of this season, despite the recent result against Juve, and Inter have been the same. Torino and Atalanta play really exciting football, but you just wonder whether they can do it over the course of a full season. No offence, but with Milan, I think they can last the distance. In terms of is this 2 points dropped? I think Torino are a really tricky game. They're really, really aggressive defensively and not easy to play out against, and that's what Milan try to do in every game. Physically, Torino they've got a lot of energy, a lot of strong players, a lot of aggressive players. So they're not an easy team to play against, especially at home. So I think it's a reasonable point. I'm not going to complain about it. I think last season Milan would have been a lot worse off in that game.
Yeah, I could see Nick nodding in agreement when you said they're a level below Roma and Napoli. I don't know if you or any of the viewers have been keeping an eye on our YouTube channel. We gave our predictions for the end of the season. I think Nick tipped Milan to finish 5th or 6th, and I reckon they could make a push for the top 3, but I feel very firmly put in my place right now. So we spoke about one crazy game that's happened this weekend, and up until tonight, the best game of the round looked like it was going to be Juventus against Fiorentina, where La Viola beat the Bianconeri 2-1 at the Artemio Franchi. Nikola Kalinic, right, he was just fantastic throughout. He absolutely destroyed Juventus's BBC, who looked a bit leggy, and this could be the first season where they really seem to be showing their age. Nick, I'll go to you for this one. Do you think it's time to really split up that BBC and maybe give Daniele Rugani a starting place in the big games?
Well, I mean, it seems to be going that way, definitely. I think this almost seems like somewhat of a transition season. He's getting more and more game time. It looks like next season he will be, at the expense of who, maybe, don't know, but it looks like he will be, I think, a regular starter come next season. They kind of look uncharacteristic at times, which, you just think, well, they're having an off game. But when they've done it a few times, you start to wonder whether maybe it is age getting to them. There's actually an interesting stat I have, doing a bit of research for the FIF pod, as always. Daniele Rugani has started 6 Serie A matches this season. Juventus has won all 6 of them. Now, he's also, of all the goals Juve have conceded, only, I think it's, what is it? It was 14 before last night's game, so it'd be 16 now. So only 2 have been conceded while Rugani's been on the field. So you look at for example, the Genoa match, he came on after 33 minutes. That was after all 3 of Genoa's goals were scored. And then they didn't concede again. So, I don't know whether that's all a coincidence or whether there's something there. I don't know. But I think it's somewhat telling in some ways, but interesting nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously the future. And I think it is time that transition is definitely happening.
I'm stunned into silence that you've actually done some research for the podcast, Nick. Usually the most unprepared of the 3. Blair, staying on the topic of Juventus, we got a question on Facebook earlier from one of the listeners, Filippo Cacciamo, who wants to know, regardless of what Juventus achieve at the end of the season, is it time for Juve and Allegri to part ways? And if so, who would be an ideal replacement?
I think that's premature, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you.
On the basis of the Fiorentina defeat, I think that's quite a short-term reaction. I mean, he wasn't particularly popular when he came in, was he? So,
no,
I think he's proved a lot of people a bit more time.
Yeah, well, this is the first time they have lost, or they've conceded 5 goals away from home, or they've conceded in 5 away matches consecutively. So something needs to change there, but I'm inclined to agree that it is a bit reactionary to start pointing fingers at Allegri, and it does kind of smack of the reaction that a lot of people had when he was at Milan, and the problems were clearly more deeply rooted than Allegri then. And Now I think they could be as simple as just sorting the defence out and maybe giving some younger players a run. So Nick, we'll move back over to you. You spoke about this game immediately after the final whistle with Vieri, who was voicing his concerns about Fiorentina's recent injuries. One of the players who returned from injury last night was Borja Valero, and he was fantastic. I'm sure you'll agree. I think he might have been he might have been man of the match. If not, he was a contender. How much has he been missed since early December when he was ruled out?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of one of those staple players in a team. He won't necessarily grab the headlines on a weekly basis, but he very much does so much in the middle of the park in terms of controlling the team. I mean, you look just things like his passing. He had a 95% pass success rate last night. He chipped in with a few tackles here and there. Just, I think he provides such a. I mean, for Paulo Sousa, you just think he's just that reliable person that you can have in there that you know is going to do that job and can do it well, consistently. He rarely makes a lot of the mistakes that possibly some of his teammates have been making. And I think you saw, in terms of Fiorentina going out there and being able to dominate a Juventus team, which is very rarely dominated in Serie A. I think he no doubt had a big part of that, and makes it easy for the likes of Kalinic to actually have such a strong game up front. So, he won't get the massive plaudits necessarily, but as you said, I think he was one of the standouts. I think Sanchez as well, filling in defence, was extremely solid at the back. He was probably my man of the match as well, actually.
I don't really like asking this question, but I kind of have to keep people interested. So it's down to 1 point gap at the top. Juventus have a game in hand over Roma. Is there any chance that Roma or Napoli can do something and try and put together a serious title challenge? Blair, I've heard Nick's opinion on this before, so I'll let you take it.
Roma, no, because I think they're basically the Italian Arsenal. So I can see them getting to a certain point and falling away very quickly. With Napoli, I think long-term Napoli are the natural successors to Juventus, actually. I think the business they did last summer was really impressive. They signed Maximovic and Tonelli, two of the best centre-backs in Italy, in Serie A, outside the big three. And they brought in Zielinski and Diawara and Milik, obviously. So they've got a really, really good core of young players coming through. Sarri's not going anywhere, and I think he's got a very clear idea of the football he wants to play, and it's successful to an extent. So I think you could argue that the Napoli of last season would be top of the Serie A this season, because I don't think Juventus have really kicked on despite the new signings. So I think I can see them succeeding Juventus over the next few years. Whether they do it this season, though, I think that's a bit ambitious. So I can see Roma and Napoli plugging away, but yeah, I don't see either team overtaking Juventus this season still, unfortunately. And even if they were 3 or 4 points clear, the sort of natural realism that's been sort of forced down me over the years would think that Juventus are going to still pull it off in the end.
Yeah, it's a bit of a depressing time to try and push Serie A to a competitive league. You see games like tonight, but then ultimately, do they really mean all that much when Juventus are still just going to stroll to the title?
Exactly.
You mentioned Napoli. I don't know if you saw their game against Pescara. They won 3-0 or 3-1. Sorry. They were frustrated mostly for the first half. And then I think, was it Lorenzo Tonelli, their new number 9, that opened the scoring? And then I don't know if you saw Peter Zielinski played a fantastic pass over the top, and Marek Hamsik turned it in, showing that Peter Zielinski has just slotted so well into that team. And I think he started 11 of their games so far this year. Come on as a sub in 8. But do either of you think he should be starting every single game, given that he's young, he's coming through, and he clearly has an impact when he does play?
I'm just going to quickly say I would prefer Alan. I still prefer Alan, but Zielinski's a really good sort of a very natural replacement for him. They're both dynamic, up and down midfielders. They can defend and attack. So it's a tricky decision to make, actually. But I would just prefer Alan.
Nick, anything to add?
Yeah, it's a hard one. Like, I'm a massive fan of Zielinski. I think, as you said, he's really starting to slot in well in that outfit. And actually, I did the top Serie A midfielders for FIF for 2016, and I had him in there just because of not only how well he's done as an individual, but how much he's progressed. Coming from Empoli and to be able to progress into that Napoli outfit. So, I mean, I guess it's a good thing for Sarri to have, which potentially he hasn't had in past years in terms of that choice in the midfield. So I think I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for Napoli or Zielinski in itself. I think this is potentially Napoli looking to build a team that can actually win the Scudetto, going back to the whole Juventus question. While I don't think it will be this season, I think they are building that squad now that can push for it. So, as Blair kind of said, I think he can. I do understand him possibly starting from the bench sometimes. In terms of Alan, I guess can just be that more consistent kind of direct play where Zielinski has that ability to possibly have more of an impact in terms of that dynamic kind of play. So, I can't understand him coming from the bench, but I mean, I think the more minutes he generally plays, the better for Napoli. So, and I think he will gradually just kind of, I mean, it seems with every game he's becoming more and more natural in that new team. So I think he will become more and more often a starter for them.
Okay, well, we did speak briefly about their new star striker, Lorenzo Tonelli. And with them losing Higuain in the summer and then going on to lose Eric Milik through injury so early on, Tonelli, Hamsik and Mertens scoring at the weekend, is this the best way to replace a striker who scores so many and you become so reliant on by everybody chipping in rather than it just being down to the one man up front? Nick, actually, Blair, I'll take you for this because Nick's going to go on a rant in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I think Napoli are a really strong team, aren't they? A really strong team. That's the thing. In the sense that last season they relied a lot on Higuain. This season they've sort of been forced to spread out a bit more. Mertens has come in with a few goals as a false nine, and Sinya's continued to score on and off, and Callaghan's still there. So I mean, they've got players that can score goals. Hamsik can score goals. Alan Zielinski can get forward and contribute. So if anybody's well placed to handle the loss of a striker, you would think it would be Napoli. In terms of being able to spread the share of goals around the team. Over to Nick for his rant.
Okay, yeah. So Blair, if you need to use the bathroom or make a cup of tea or anything, I suggest this is the time to do it. I might go and do the same because
I didn't know I ranted.
We're going to talk about Inter, Nick, and we'll let the listeners decide. They won again. You mentioned earlier, so you're happy. It shouldn't be an anger. It's going to be more a confession of love, I think, than anything else. But okay, so Gagliardini, we spoke last week and we said we were worried that he might not play all that regularly. We showed exactly what we know because not only did he play, but he was pretty impressive. So, Nick, take it away.
Yeah. Wow. So, yeah, I did not expect him to start that quickly. So obviously came from what's that team called again?
Don't do this.
Study a C team or something. No. Only joking. I actually do like Atalanta. Fellow Nerazzurri. Anyway, back to the question.
Can you just say that again? I didn't quite hear you.
I said fellow Nerazzurri.
No, before that. You do quite like Atalanta, did you?
No, I think you misheard me.
This is recording.
No, I didn't expect him to start. That's for sure. It's particularly given the likes of Gabagol, what's happened with him. I mean, how much preparation can you have in 5 days? You have to question that. But then, I mean, you can't really challenge it so much given the performance that he put in. He was incredible for a first game coming from Atalanta to Inter. That was amazing for me. He looked like he belonged in that team. It looked like he'd been playing with them the whole season at the very least. He was impacting in attack. He had like a few shots on goal even. He was making passes and then he was tracking back. He made a few key challenges. There was one or two really good, solid tackles that he made. So, yeah, unbelievable. I as much as people are talking him up, I did not expect him to do that in Inter, and that was my worry. That I didn't want him to come and just kind of sit on the bench. So, much credit to Pioli for having the confidence in him. Obviously, he must have impressed the coach at training. And, if he's impressing, if he's looked like he's going to do the job, then why not play him, I guess. So it's not like our Inter's defensive midfield in terms of that too. It's been very kind of up in arms in terms of who plays that role. So, it allowed João Mario to play in a higher role as well. Didn't have the best game in that position, but, it does allow him a bit of freedom to play more akin to what he's possibly used to. So, and then I think you even mentioned to me, Connor, that it actually allowed Kondogbia to even have a lot better game than what he has in the past. I think it gave him a lot more space to work with. There was a few times when he was able to actually get into some space, also due to his own skill as well. But there's still those elements where he kind of shows some frustrating. He does those amazing turns and has those brilliant touches, and then puts a pass straight into the sideline 50 meters away. So, that aspect he still needs to work on. There's a lot more he needs to do, but a lot of positive signs in that midfield.
Yeah, I suppose, when he made the step down from Atalanta to Inter, I thought he would take it in his stride because he's been playing brilliant football in a good team all season. But then when I saw he was starting, I was a bit nervous, especially seeing that he was starting beside Jeffrey Kondogbia, because I just thought he'd become so exposed. But it really seemed to work. Like you say, Kondogbia had more space. I think he knew that if he lost the ball, Gagliardini would track back. Whether or not that can last, and if Gagliardini is happy to just keep sweeping up for Kondogbia all season, could be another thing. So, Blair, I'll bring you back into this as we move away from Inter. Well done for sitting through that, by the way. Lazio beat Atalanta at the Olimpico this weekend in a meeting of two of the most informed sides. Lazio are now, I think they're fourth. They're 1 point off third, correct me if I'm wrong, and 3 or 4 off Roma. Mm-hmm. How high can they aim? I know you think that Napoli and Roma are kind of in their own little league between Juventus and the rest, but can Lazio and Milan or anybody disturb that?
Well, when you asked me about Milan earlier, I actually forgot about Lazio in that mix because they're probably the best contenders for fourth, along with Milan. I don't know. I think I'm really impressed with what Inzaghi's done in his first season at Lazio. That's a seriously impressive achievement. What impresses me the most is how so many of the young players seem to be pulling for him and working for him. Guys like Keita Balde-João and Felipe Anderson, who, over the last few years, the commitment's been questioned, I think, and sort of rightly so with some of their performances. They blew hot and cold, to say the least. This season, they've been really consistent, versatile as well. Anderson is sometimes filled in as a right wing back, which you would just never have imagined him doing before, and worked very hard in that position and played well. So, yeah, I like what Inzaghi's doing there, and they've got a really strong young team as well. But I know we talked about Atalanta and Torino and Milan. Lazio don't have as many young Italian players, but they do have a lot of young players. Guys like Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, Keita and Anderson. I'm sure I'm missing a few out, but there's a number of really talented young players there. So with a young coach in Inzaghi, the future looks very bright. But yeah, not massively certain they can challenge the top 3 this season. Maybe next season.
Well, they don't have many young Italian players, but one Italian player they do have who's in great form, is Ciro Immobile. He has. That's an unfortunate thing. Ciro Immobile. He has 11 goals in Serie A this year. He's not capocannoniere. He doesn't look like he's going to really contend with Belotti and Icardi. But do you think he's nailed on to accompany Belotti in the national team? They've a good understanding of one another from their time with Torino, and they seem to be pretty good mates. Do you think the two of them will work well for Italy going forward?
Yeah, and the games they've played together, they've worked really well together, haven't they? I mean, on paper, you'd say they're almost too similar to work well as a two, because Immobile and Belotti both like to run the channels. You sort of need one player to do that, and the other player sort of hangs around the centre in the penalty area. But I think they've worked well with Italy so far. They're an absolute nightmare for defences, aren't they? Because they never stop running. They'll defend from the front as well. So I like them as a pairing. Maybe they don't have the skill set that you would traditionally associate with some of Italy's top number 9s. But then if you look at last summer, neither do Eder and Pella, and they worked well. So yeah, I can see Belotti and Immobile being a good sort of short-term partnership. I would also throw Petagna into that mix still from Atalanta. I don't know how you would feel about that, but he really, really impresses me. You know, he has a lot of technique, especially in comparison to Immobile and Belotti, who are more sort of workers and finishers.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you about Petagna, though I'm not sure I would throw him into the Italy setup just yet. But we spoke a little earlier this season. I think you were writing a piece about Petagna from an AC Milan perspective, and I was just saying, and I still feel that I haven't been anything but surprised by him this year. I just thought he was this big lump who played up front, and Papu Gomez would hit the ball at his head every once in a while. But
he does look like a big lump.
He does. He's a scary big lump as well. But no, he runs the channels. He's not bad on the ball. His goal at the weekend was very good technically. It just really surprises me how well he's fitted into a team that isn't as direct as you might expect them to be from previous seasons. Staying in Rome, but leaving Lazio. Just talk briefly about Roma. They beat Udinese 1-0, and this is without Mohamed Salah, who has been so key for them this year. Nick, last week you were saying you didn't think they were that much of a one-man team, but they struggled to break Udinese down a lot this week. Do you think that was largely due to Salah missing, or was there something more to it?
Yeah, I mean, I said last week I didn't want to read too much into it, and again, I'm not, ready to start writing them off yet. But to put it plainly, they haven't played well the last 2 matches. In terms of creating chances, they just haven't looked the same. They haven't looked as lively at all. They just don't convince you. Where at the first half of the season, when they had the ball, you were kind of on the edge of the seat because it always looked like something might be created at all times. Where this kind of in attack, it seems like a different team all of a sudden. Whether that's completely Salah or whether it's just a bit of somewhat of a hangover still from the Christmas break. Juventus haven't come back the best either from the break. So, I think the key thing with them is that they have actually won both the matches, and that's probably the difference from the Roma of that we've seen in previous years, where a Roma that's not playing well will drop points and drop them by imploding, basically. So I think that's a really positive sign for them, that they are lacking a lot in terms of missing that attacking flair with Salah, and then they don't seem to be playing well. But if they can grind out the results, then that's a really good sign. Particularly, again, not necessarily for this year, but for future years. But in saying that, I mean, I think Salah has definitely had an impact. I was looking through the shots per game, and while Dzeko's obviously usually, I mean, he's completely dominated basically the last couple games since Salah's been absent, and there hasn't really been anyone below him. The next in line quite a way down. Basically, he's had 7 shots and 6 shots in the last 2 games, and Roma's total shots were 13 and 15. So he's basically had the majority on one and almost the majority on the other. Where the games before that against Chievo, against Juventus, while he had 9 shots against Chievo, for instance, there was a total of 25 shots, and you had El Shaarawy with 5, Niang, Salah chipping in with 3. So there was a lot more going on around him. So, and I think that's the key. I think Salah is definitely a big part of that attacking puzzle in terms of Roma's attacking threat in being able to attack all sides and also through Dzeko. So, and I think when Dzeko has that added pressure, when they're relying on him, he doesn't necessarily have the temperament to be able to handle it. And then you get those kind of penalties where, well, I mean, we know what happened with that. So, I am seeing personally the difference without Salah, definitely, but they've got the results so far. And if they can continue that through January, getting the results here and there, then, well played to Roma, because that's a huge improvement on what they've been in the previous seasons.
So I can be found on Twitter at the Blair Newman. I write regularly for Sport Deck, Max at These Football Times, and Gentleman Ultra, where I'm the co-editor. And we've got a really exciting feature this week, actually, where every day we release 10 really talented sort of under 21 players based in Serie A. So get on that over at the Gentleman Ultra. It's called Grande 50.
Cool. If anyone, I don't know why you'd want to, but if you want to follow me on Twitter, at Nick Z Carroll, CARROLL. And of course, be sure to jump on the FIF YouTube page, which we've been running for a bit over a week now. So we're trying to get out daily content on that. Vier is doing daily transfer news and updates on all the goings on, the moves and rumours here and there. There's also some mid-season reviews on there for a few of the top clubs. And basically any big news or some post-match hangouts similar to this, basically we'll be trying to do wherever we can. So if you can, jump onto YouTube and support us wherever you can. And also, if you're feeling extra generous, there's also an FIF Patreon page where you can help support the FIF team. Obviously, we all, well, you might not know, but we all volunteer our time for this. So any kind of donations or anything helps us to get some equipment and basically provide a better product for the listeners. So, we're trying to make this the best kind of Serie A coverage available. So if you can give anything, whether it's £1, £2, or if you've got a nice inheritance, then please feel free to give us a big chunk. So any help is very much appreciated. I believe Connor's mic is broke, so I might just wrap it up. Blair, I'm sure the viewers were very happy to see a new face on the screen. So very much thank you for coming on and sharing your opinions and views.
No, thanks for having me on, man. It was you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
That's good. It's just us two. Shaking his head there in a little corner in the side. No, I had a good podcast with you, Nick. It was great to be on the show. And you, Connor, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure hopefully we'll have you back sometime soon. But otherwise, from Connor, Blair, and myself, it's ciao for now, and we'll see you next week.